Well, Richard, thank you very much for joining me. Really appreciate you spending this time. I mean, it's really great to have you on the podcast. Very excited about this meeting.
Thanks, Richard. I am as well.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I'm going to just kick off by just getting some of your background. I'd love to know what your journey is, your education, how you got into this, specifically how your journey, your road to Avon happened.
Yeah, sure. I probably think it's more interesting than other people will think, but I think it's a pretty neat story. I went to college at Penn State, was an accounting major, played lacrosse there. I didn't have a great passion for accounting. I'm not even sure I was very good at it, but it was a great foundation for me. Went from there to KPMG. Got my certification, became a CPA, and I knew it wasn't for me long term. I got a call from Avon, so I guess I got the doorbell rung from Avon to me through a search firm. It was for an internal audit position, and all I heard really was, "You're going to pay me to travel the world." I was like, "I'm in." So I went to Avon. Was in part of the internal audit team that got to travel to Europe, to Latin America, to Asia. Really got a chance to not just do financial audits, but also operational audits to get a better feel for the company, better feel for how does this work, different cultures, diversity, teamwork. Great experience for me. From there, it really set me up for the rest of my career at Avon.
Yeah, and what an amazing company Avon is. I mean, what kind of volume were they doing at the time that you were there with them?
Oh boy, I mean, when I was there, I actually got there in 1990, and we were, at that time, we were fighting off some takeover battles. It was a really interesting time at Avon, where they had diversified in the late 80s into non-Avon, I would say non-beauty areas. So own Tiffany's, own retirements in America, all these kind of different business models. It shrunk down, but at the end of the day, before I left, Avon was over $8 billion worldwide, and I was part of the U.S. business at the end of my career, and we were at about $2 billion for North America.
That is actually crazy amounts of money.
Yeah,
Hey,
it's a
and when you can,
big company, Richard, and um, a great company, fabulous company in what they did in terms of development of people, in terms of the go-to-market structure and strategy that had been built and refined over many years. And I think the reason why there are a lot of proud Avon alumni out there, both in direct selling and some out of direct selling, is that we all feel grateful for the effort that Avon as a company put into us in terms of our leadership, our professional, and our human development.
now, how do they go about that? I mean, they've obviously built some amazing leaders. If you have a look at, I've got many stories. We've interviewed many people in the Avon field, and they're all doing really well. How did they manage to develop that kind of leadership?
Well, I think there is an effort to reward those associates at Avon that show a level of curiosity, and I give Avon a lot of credit for that, and I hope it's part of who I am now. If you showed a level of curiosity, a level of openness, they would reward that with giving you opportunities. So, in my example, I had a desire or an openness or curiosity, some combination of those, to travel the world and learn about new cultures. And I let that be known that I was open to an overseas assignment as a young man. And, that's all, that's all it took. Maybe it took that as well as, really great day-to-day leadership to help me develop. But with that curiosity and openness, they gave me an opportunity to be, a very young man, but to move to Hong Kong with my wife, and,
What an
have a few
experience.
years there of being the finance manager in Asia. That was, a pretty big risk they took, but I think that's at the core of what they were very good at, which is if you're willing and able, they'll give you the opportunity, and it was part of the culture.
Well, I mean, that is typical of multi-level marketing business as a whole, because there's an old saying in our industry that the cream rises to the top. And the
Hmm.
companies are generally quite geared towards identifying that cream that is rising to the top and giving out opportunities. Obviously, did that with you. Did you spend your entire time in Avon in the financial side of things?
No, that's another part of the, I'm forever thankful to Avon. So it's actually kind of a good story. When I was in Hong Kong, I was the finance manager and I had a small team. And it was filled with, I would call Avon legends, people like John Novosad as the leader, Stephen Kane, as the finance, Jacques Langevin. Uh, the list, it was a long list. Louise Anthony. These are people that had great careers. They did not have a staff, even though they ran sales or they ran marketing or they ran the entire region. And so they relied on me quite a bit to be their staff. That meant putting presentations together. That means doing the analytics on a business model. Do we go to and enter a country or not? All those, I was I was the support staff. My team and I were the support staff. So I got this great exposure to the other functional areas of the company. And, I didn't have to ask for it. They came to me and said, so where do you want your career to go? Do you want to stay in finance and do you want to kind of continue to move up the world in finance, or do you want to try something different? Now, maybe it was I wasn't that good at finance. I don't know. But I think it was really their openness that I showed a level of interest in other areas. I told them I'd like to go into sales. I'd like to go ultimately to general management and sales. And I felt that my knowledge of the financial and the KPIs really would help me. I'd had some leadership experience in my life, so I'm a competitive and energetic person, and they didn't blink. They said that sounds good for us, and so I moved into
Amazing.
sales. So great opportunity for me.
So, were you in the sales in the East? Is that where you were doing your sales?
Yeah, I came back. I repatriated back from Asia, and I came back to the Northeast, where again they took a chance on me and said, yeah, I know everyone said yes, but let's really check you out. And they, had some great mentors: Harriet Edelman, Angie Rossi, great leaders from the Avon Northeast, which is where I repatriated back to at a division manager level, and then made my way through there. But yeah, it was on the East Coast and the Northeast in particular.
So, I'm just making some notes here, if you don't mind, your regions. Um, in terms of your sales experience, were you actually in the field tackling the actual clients, or were you working with the field? What was
Yeah,
your
so my
responsibility in
my
that
first
area?
yeah, that's a great question. Avon was a bit, like we said, a very large company, so we had structure, existing structure. I wasn't building anything from scratch, right? We had an existing structure of district managers and then the Avon representative was working within a district. So an Avon representative, then a district manager, and then I was the division manager. So, but those roles were, I was in the field. I was in the field 3 to 4 days a week, full days in the field. It was not an office job, that's for sure. So it was absolute field engagement, field development. The beauty of it was I got to step back and also be strategic in terms of what programs within the framework of the Avon compensation plans and cadence, et cetera, but what programs were uniquely open and available for me to use within my team, and that's what we did. And we were very entrepreneurial, uh, very creative, but still with the mechanisms and the kind of routines that Avon had built over 100 years.
Yeah. In terms of these sales strategies, or can you give me an example of how that would look?
Yeah, for example, those years it was really a question whether or not Avon was going to have a multi-level marketing arm to them. Avon for a long time was single level. It was not going to go to a multi-level marketing. And an example is that my view, and maybe my finance background, I looked at the math and I said, boy, we're missing something here. We've got this multi-level marketing strategy, but not a lot of adoption towards it. So my view was that's crazy. Let's get after it. Let's let's really lean in to this hybrid direct selling machine, but let's start to build out the multi-level marketing we called Avon leadership. And so we put a great effort on that. And, it helped, obviously. It helped the math, right? It helped the
Yeah.
number of new people we were bringing in. It helped the retention of people that we were bringing into the business, helped them stay longer. And we had a good run. We had a good run.
Yeah, I know. I mean, look, obviously a huge company, so they definitely did something right somewhere along the line. In terms of, I mean, what I've found with the Avon people is that there's an enormous amount of loyalty there. These
Yes.
are not the kind of people who are bouncing from one business to the other. If you become an Avon lady or you get involved in Avon, you tend to stay with it. You don't want to go off to Amway or Herbalife or whatever. How do you guys manage to get such intense loyalty? Is it the product? Is it the brand? Is it the training? What are you guys doing to create that loyalty?
Yeah, I think I think it's a bigger picture. I think it's the parts that I was talking about earlier. There's a culture, or there was a culture there. I'm not quite sure it exists the same way any longer, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. But there's a culture there of much more depth than what happened today. It was a culture there about caring, and therefore, you know, you sometimes would say the grass, yeah, maybe the grass is greener, but probably not.
Yeah, what do they
Because
say?
what
The
I
grass
have
is
here,
greener on the other side of the fence because there's a lot of bull manure there.
yeah, yeah, right. So that's right. So for many of us, we had built these relationships that were really based on a lot of depth, and culturally, people came first. I'll give you an example. I work for a gentleman named Angie Rossi, and he's best leader I've ever worked with, and you know we always had a monthly meeting to go over our people. Always. It didn't mean that things were going good or bad. It was a standard structure to it. And what that allowed him to do is to understand two levels below him what's happening, who are that, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what do they like to do, what don't they like to do. So then we would then plan for not only the high potentials within that group, but let's say someone's not a high potential, but they're just a great division manager. Well, we would work together on how do we put them in a situation to win. It created these tremendous bonds that I don't think were unique to just Angie, myself, and my team. But if I look to other regions, other parts of the world, you would see that same culture of people being connected to the greater group of people, connected to the cause. So I think far more about that than it was about our products, which we were very proud of, but far more about the culture is what really kept this loyalty factor strong for so many years.
Now, I've said this to my clients, I cannot even begin to tell you how many times that people come for the compensation, but they stay for the love.
Yeah, that's right.
Um, they want to feel recognized, they want to feel like they belong, they want to feel important. And people get so little recognition in the world out there. And in our space, in the multi-level marketing space, it's a place where you really can, if you're prepared to work and the company's got a proper culture of recognizing their leadership and the people who are doing things, that retention can be very high. And obviously Avon
Richard,
proved it.
I'll follow up that with a kind of funny anecdote. So I think I mentioned earlier, I went to Penn State, played lacrosse. I'm friends with a bunch of other guys, we'll call it, right? And they, here I am working for a company that's called The Company for Women. We're famous for our lipsticks. And they would say to me, what's with you and the lipsticks? And I would turn on them in a second and say, it's dreams and goals. It's not
Yeah.
the lipstick. And I think that wasn't just me saying it. That is what an Avon person would say. We were all about the Avon representatives' dreams and goals. And that really permeated from the representative ranks to the field to our colleagues in marketing and finance and operations. Um, it was about dreams and goals, which is far more sticky and far more broader than what is our shade of lipstick and how long will it stay on your lips before reapplication.
Yeah, I interviewed a girl. I can't remember her surname here. It's on my podcast. If people dig around in it, called Gail, and she is an Avon lady, and she's been with the company many years. But the year that I interviewed her, which is about 2 years ago, just before I interviewed her, just before COVID hit,
Hmm.
and she said to me she'd made in the previous year she'd made £6 million from
Hmm.
Avon.
Hmm.
£6 million. I mean, that is just crazy money for an individual
Hmm.
to make. And if you talk about dreams and goals, she just told me that Avon had made all of her dreams come true. She
Yeah,
was very
that's
goal oriented, but you
great.
know,
Yeah, it's there are many people there, and everyone has a unique and different dream and goal, and some of their dreams and goals may be about that incredible earning opportunity. In her example, fantastic, and others are different, modest, or could be about I want to be a better leader myself. That's my goal. I want to make a difference with others. That's my goal. So I felt that Avon did a very good job of instilling that to their leaders to listen for what the person's dreams and goals are, and
you
let's
know.
let's work towards achieving that. Let's not assume that everyone has the same dream and goal.
Yeah, and for some people starting out, talking about $6 million is just ridiculous. They would be happy if they could add an extra $100 to their bottom line at
Right.
the end of the month because that would help pay the school fees or whatever.
That's right.
So very often people join our industry with very small, but meaningful goals, and then build from there. You know.
Right. And certainly, I think um, Avon and other companies, that in our industry that do that well, really, really do listen.
Yeah.
Really do listen for what is it, because we know it's going to be unique to the individual.
So the idea is you train your leadership to sit down and actually work with the new distributor and find out what it is they want to do, and then build a strategy or a plan for them to achieve that. Is that kind
Yeah,
of the
I
approach?
mean, from the old days to the current, it was all about in that onboarding process, listening to what we're, and we had, in the old days it was paper. You're sitting down with someone in their living room. I know that that's changed because technology and life has changed, but the concepts are the same. How do we find out? How do we guide the leader through training on how to ask those appropriate questions, how to listen, really listen for what is that prospect or that new representative or that new consultant saying, so then we can adapt our response and make sure that we have a path to help them on their path for their dreaming goal, not the corporate dreaming goal.
This is an important point because I think that you mentioned that technology has come in and things have changed. But I don't think that it's always for the best that this technology has come in
Mm-hmm.
because, to a large extent, what I'm finding is that the leaders are trying to do a one to many approach.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to get onto Zoom and train 50 people, and that they lose this exact thing that you're talking about is completely lost in the wash
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because nothing beats sitting down belly to belly with the distributor, finding out where they're going and helping them to achieve that.
Yeah.
And the concept today seems to be, let me put as much noise into my life as possible. If some drop off, who cares? But that's where the churn, I think, comes from. We're
it's
missing out
it
what you've just
it's
described.
very interesting, Richard, because as you know, I've been both inside direct selling and outside of direct selling, and what I see happening now is in the we in direct selling haven't quite figured out yet how to hit the sweet spot of how to grow your funnel using technology, how to really get the word out there using technology, where it, but then bring it down to that one-on-one, and when is it appropriate. And certainly there are
Yeah.
distributors and consultants and representatives that do a great job of this. I have a personal relationship with someone who's at Arbonne right now who does a great job of this and highly successful. Uh, you know, really good in social media, and then brings it down, and then really good in a very traditional, real life, one-on-one or 1 to 2 small group settings where she's driving her leadership unit very, very effectively. I think you're right, though. What I see happen way too often is social selling really just means posting, and
Yes.
and that is where That is what has happened outside of direct selling, where companies are going direct to consumer and they're finding, wow, this is expensive, because the cost of acquisition to do that and your very, very low conversion rate is a problem. So
Yeah.
direct selling, I think, is at a crossroads here where we have to figure out how to use the technology to broaden our reach, yet still bring that meaningful moment where we, that moment where we are belly to belly or one to one or one to two, having those meaningful conversations where you can ask those questions about dreams and goals and really have a
Yeah.
creative and carefully crafted support plan for the individual.
Because most people they never get a chance to do this entrepreneurial thing that we're talking about here. If you have a look at how most people are working, they go through school for 12 years and they get told to sit down, shut up, face the front, and do what I
Mm-hmm.
say. Then they go through university where their whole thinking process is narrowed down to some speciality. And when they pop out at the other side, whatever creativity they may have had has been completely and utterly squeezed
Mm-hmm.
out of them. And now you expect this person to come along, join the multi-level marketing space, and just because you happen to do a weekly Zoom call with them, they're going to go out there and be successful. But the reality is, for most people, they can't make that transition from the employee mindset to the entrepreneurial mindset. And I think what you're talking about is absolutely where the MLM space and the culture comes into play, where your concept is to help these people to make that transition, take them from where they are, which is employee mindset, to a point where they've got this entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I think you're right. Um, there are pockets where people are doing this well, but certainly for the industry, it appears that we don't have critical mass. That we don't have critical mass
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, and I think it starts from the companies down, because the leadership of the company, they just want to drive numbers. And they're not worried about developing the culture of their
Mm-hmm.
company. They want to see the numbers, and it's all about how many people have recruited, what is happening on that front, how many sales have we got, and the churn is just part of the sort of the underlying noise for them.
Yeah.
And I think that it bears really reiterating that if you want to be successful, as Avon has been, you have to have that underlying culture that really cares about people, because this is business about people.
It's
It's not, as
interesting,
you said,
Richard,
it's not
because
about
now,
products.
as I do in my current world, I help and I support a lot of companies in direct selling and outside of direct selling. And I could still tell you that the founder leaders in direct selling space compared to outside still have an advantage here, in that many of them, they may not execute well, but they recognize what you're saying.
Yeah.
As compared to some of the CEO founders that I work with outside of the space, that doesn't, what you're describing won't even hit the radar. I think
Yes.
in the multi-level marketing direct selling space, it's mostly about execution. It's not about I believe what we're saying, and so really the fall down many times is, how do you execute? How do you make that culture? How do you institutionalize it so that everyone believes that we are here for dreams and goals? We are here to craft almost a personalized journey, right? Help them with their personalized journey. Um, I, I find more of the direct selling and multi-level marketing founders and CEOs and heads of sales that I work with, they get it. The challenge is the execution. How do you do it? Not should we do
Yeah.
it?
I, I think where, and this is where the first step is that the CEOs who are coming into the MLM space need to recognize that this is a completely different animal. Multi-level marketing is not traditional e-commerce. It's not traditional business. Basically, what you're doing is you're running a traditional business, and you're running a massive army of
Yes.
volunteers. And I sort of put it in the same place as a church, for
Mm-hmm.
example. So you don't just have one business here. You got two separate businesses with two totally different approaches. And this is where the CEOs who don't have the real experience in running big teams should come to people like you and should say, hey, listen, we understand that we don't understand this. We know what we don't know. Come in and help us strategize and put in strategies for all of these things we need to do, because you institutionalize things fundamentally through strategy.
Yes.
And once the strategy is in place, the belief
Yeah.
follows.
No, it's funny. We talked about Avon a little while ago, and my career at Avon and what made it special. We used the words that you just said. That was part of our vernacular. We recognized we had 600,000 Avon representatives in the United States. And that's a lot of people. And of course, we had a lot of
Yeah.
churn. That was part of the challenge. How do you reduce the churn? But we recognized that this was very much a volunteer army, very much. And how do we have people staying with us for a greater reason than the lipstick? And so your example
Or
is
the money.
right on, or only the money. And we recognize that many people were there for other reasons. Many of them were there not for the money. They were there for the camaraderie. They were there for their own personal leadership, for the self-esteem, for the connectivity. And so you're right on. I agree entirely that this notion of a volunteer army is a critical element of a successful direct selling companies. And I would say, and I'm sure you've spoken to many CEOs, some of the great CEOs in the direct selling space, they get that. They understand.
Yeah.
And it's the reason why many of them have grown to great levels and then have been able to continue rather than spiking up and down. So it's really a critical element.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember speaking to a CEO. He came out of a traditional background. He was in retail. He got disenchanted with the retail side of things. He did this normal, the calculation 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. He saw this curve going through the roof. He started shopping for Porsches. He decided that multi-level marketing was the place to be. And his words to me, he said, I want you to put a proper compensation plan together, and then we're going to let the greed drive the network. And I said to him, if that is your attitude, I promise you, you are destined to fail right now. And the 5 things I've identified, and I want to touch on them with you. The number one thing is your product. If you don't have a proper product, you don't have a business. So you have to have a product that people can get passionate about, can believe in, and you can lock them in from an emotional point of view into the products. The second thing is you've got to have a compensation plan that has a decent yield so that people can earn money. But those are the things that get people in. Okay, the product retains them. People will stay in the business because they love the product. But the money is not what keeps people in. I mean, I've seen people leave jobs that are high paying for low paying jobs where they get other soft benefits. And the things that I've identified, and you've identified them now as well, is I call it social, you called it camaraderie, this feeling of belonging to something. I think is one of the big drivers in our industry. I reckon it's 20% of what drives our industry. Incentives, I think, is a huge driver of what drives our industry. And then recognition, I think, is also, specifically in a company like Avon, which is predominantly women. I've found, because I ran a company called Acorn Kids, we had about 10,000 ladies in that business selling children's bath products. And I found that the need for recognition in that space was head and shoulders above what we needed to do with other companies we've dealt with just men. And so recognition being a big one. So I wanted to just touch on those with you, and I was hoping you could start with recognition. How did Avon handle recognition? What was their policies and strategies?
Oh, it was an enormous part of our culture. We firmly believe is one of the values of the company was to properly recognize. And I think what Avon did well, very well, was 2 areas I would say that stick out to me within our view of recognition. One is, let's be fair and honest about our recognition. So let's not recognize things that weren't laid out to be recognized. So let's differentiate. There is a, my kids played Little League soccer and basketball and lacrosse and baseball, and certainly, yeah, they all got their plaque at the end of the season, but they were five. When we did believe in recognize whenever you can, but let's be honest about the recognition so that the top achievers know that they were the top achievers, and we had a
So you're
proper
not
recognition.
devaluing it.
We did not devalue it. It was the second thing I think Avon did extremely well, and of course it helps to be around for as long as they were, is they were institutionalized. So the recognition was institutionalized, in terms of the formality of it, and the repetition of it. So their programs were, uh, woven in to the fabric. When you became an Avon representative, you wanted to achieve President's Club, because then you made it. And everything was geared towards that first level of recognition, where
Yeah.
they were held to such a high regard, and all of the culture, the history was really built around those programs that were formalized recognition. So I thought Avon did a really good job of, let's be honest about the recognition, part of what we always do, but be honest and don't devalue it, and let's institutionalize it. And so therefore everything was built into everything, even the onboarding of a new person. You were touching upon, let's make sure you're clear about what is this level called President's Club. And then there were many levels above it, but President's Club was the kind of the anchor of how do we really make a meaningful recognition program that has been around for 100 years. So the benefit for them is they had it for that long, but it was core and central. We never got off it.
So how did they recognize the President's Club? What actually was the mechanics behind that?
Yeah. So it really is great question. Really, a number of ways. So one way was with some level of guaranteed within the compensation program. There was some benefit to being a President's Club member. You locked into certain commission rates, etc. So one was mechanical, but was part of their compensation. So there was an element there. Then there was local recognition. So if you were a President's Club member, you were recognized by your district manager. A district could be just a few towns. That's the size of a district in the United States. So, maybe there was 300 representatives, 400 representatives in a district, and you were recognized in front of your neighbors and your colleagues and your sister and brother, mostly sister representatives at Avon, within your small community, and then you were recognized at a much higher level, at a division level, where now you were recognized amongst all, let's say, New York State. And so we had these levels of recognition for President's Club, including in that was some iconography. So, they got every year a brand new, we called it an Albie. PF Albie is the iconic leader of Avon, back from the 1800s. And so every year they got a beautiful porcelain Albie, and people collected those. So it became
Okay.
also a token, as well
Oh,
as
nice.
just a moment. You had both, and people had their Albie rooms. It was, really, really institutionalized.
And then would that recognition happen at a meeting? In other words, would
Yes,
you call the people up onto the
absolutely.
stage
Multiple,
and
yes,
everybody
the
gives
whole
them a
thing.
clap? They would.
Exactly. So
What
it
else would
happened at
they
a
get
meeting
to?
at the
Yeah.
district level, and then we would have a larger meeting at the division level, which was, you're one of just a handful of people, let's say, the district level, that make President's Club, a 300 people, 400 people district. A handful are making it there, maybe a couple dozen, kind of thing. But then you get to, the state, let's say, yes, 8,000-9,000 representatives in the state of New York. Well, there's way more than that, actually, but in that range, let's say, and you're one of just a very small group, so you really feels elite. You feel very special.
Yeah, and that obviously that keeps people in the game, because
Oh yeah.
if I'm
Well,
getting my LB every year and I'm getting recognized every year,
oh yeah.
that's what keeps. That's the
The
retention.
turnover and retention levels for President's Club were incredibly high. Yeah, people that were at President's Club for 30 years. they weren't leaving. You know,
Yeah.
this was their family. It was really in the fabric of their life.
And then lower ends, like for example, the person makes their first sale, or
Oh, sure.
they,
Yeah. At the
how
district
does that
level, there
work?
was recognition, congratulations. We had new representative development programs where, you know, if you hit different benchmarks, you were recognized top new person in the district, sales meetings, recognition. You know, obviously now it's gone more automated. So, you know, it's an area where maybe we're losing something a little bit, but, you know, we can automate this now, and now there are automation tools obviously to recognize that new person when they hit a certain threshold. And you know, I think most companies now either have that or it's on their technology path. How do we do that? But yeah,
Yeah.
certainly it's very important in the early days to recognize those first steps towards something. You know, how do you keep them going? No different than any kind of leader. You know, that first step is to be recognized. Even if it's not a
And
great accomplishment, it's your first step, which is hard.
and also this concept of automation, there's ways of doing it that um, that don't cut out the human element. So, for
Hmm.
example, in our systems, in the NetReady system, what we do is we've got an SMS, WhatsApp, or email that goes out and says, "Hey, Richard, your downline Fred just signed up John or just made their first
Right,
sale.
right,
Why don't you call Fred and congratulate him on what he's doing, and then
right,
call Adam, who just made his first sale, and tell him well done?"
right.
And our system will go 3 or 4 levels up the line. And so
Hmm.
this guy who's just done his first sale will get 4 or 5 calls from his upline to say,
Hmm.
"Hey, well done. I see you just did your first
Right.
sale." And so there's ways of automating these things that don't take the human element out of it. And I think that is critically important for specifically for as we go into this new age. What you don't want is to get a canned message, "Congratulations for your first sale," that you know has just been generated and spat out by
Yeah.
the computer.
To me, this is the big advantage. As I said, I have clients in both in multiple channels, but this is one of the big great advantages of a direct selling multi-level marketing model is this ability to not only have your automation, because I mean, automation tools are fantastic. You know, they really are fantastic when you're dealing with volume. Um, Yet, if you're in a direct to consumer world and or in a purely affiliate marketing world, you know that automation is, everyone knows, it's just a reminder. There's no
Yeah,
connectivity about culture. And what you're describing is what I think is a great opportunity. Again, it goes down to execution for the direct sellers and the multi-level marketing companies. And how do you do that and how do you execute appropriately? Because the easy answer is let's just automate. The harder answer is, and more effective answer is, no, how do you keep the connectivity and the fibers
exactly.
of the relationships together?
100%. And again, you know, I specify that is where companies should be getting people like yourself who understand the industry from the inside out to sit down with them and say, "Okay, we want to automate. How can we automate in such a way that we keep our entire network and that the whole upline remains involved in the process?"
Yeah,
Because otherwise, what it does is the automation just disconnects the network. It
yeah.
just severs all the joints because now I don't have to do anything. The
I think
companies,
that there. I appreciate you saying that, Richard, and I agree with you entirely. I've been pleasantly surprised with, particularly with some clients that come into the space and they recognize that I don't know, and I've been very happy that there are those kind of founders, let's say, that are product or engineers that say, I want to be here, I want to be in this space, I just don't know how. And those really are great people to work with because they many times have fantastic products, as you said, which is critical, with unique
yeah.
selling propositions, critical, and then are open to say, but I don't know how to do this. Um, let's work together.
Exactly.
That's a winning proposition.
And the thing is that they are starting a multi multi-billion dollar business.
Mm-hmm.
They don't realize it, but they're starting a multi-billion dollar business. We had a client who went from 0 to 117,000 agents in 12 months.
Wow.
Okay, so and their turnover is just it's crazy. I mean, it's just insane the kind of turnovers they've got. They've got all of the right. Um, the ethos of the business is exactly right. The guy who runs it, he just cares about people. He's the world's best trainer, in my opinion. He just and they've just had this explosive growth, and their retention is really high, and their volumes are high. But what the problem is that many people start these businesses thinking that it's just compensation plan and let the greed drive them, and they don't. They miss out on the fact that they are starting this massive business, and then they're not prepared to spend the money on people like yourselves who will shortcut the entire process and take them from 0 to hero very quickly, give them that foundation from which to spring. And they're mushing through the mud here. They get 12 months down the line. They haven't hit critical mass. The business hasn't gone vertical. They're thinking, why? And at that time, they want to start getting people involved. But they've missed out the entire, I mean, there's the opportunity cost, but they've missed out all of the excitement and enthusiasm that comes from launching a new business. That's all gone. And so I do speak, when we speak to our clients, I say to them, listen, you need to seek out a proper consultant who's going to work with you through all of these aspects and make sure that you've got strategic plans for all of them.
It's certainly helpful. There's no question, Richard, that I have many colleagues in the consulting space, and some of them are, and most of them are, really really good in terms of how do we help people with this frame of mind. I think what you're bringing up is so important. The math, the greed, it doesn't work. I'm an expert spreadsheet seller. I promise you, I could put together an Excel spreadsheet that will make any business look like amazing. It never comes true without these other elements.
Exactly.
It never comes true,
100%.
but I can make it look great, and that's the risk. And I agree with what you bring up. The risk of looking at direct selling and multi-level marketing is purely an exponential play, without considering all of these other recognition, incentives, uh, um, culture, focus on the people. Why are they there? Volunteer army. Without thinking about all that, it's only going to stay on the
And
spreadsheet.
training. I mean, one of the things you mentioned earlier on, which I've made a note of here, is the whole concept of growing your people. Now, Avon must have had a massive training program because they've grown some amazing people. How did they go about that? What was their
Yeah,
approach?
I think Avon did have a great training program and tremendous trainers. One of the best people that we ever had, actually, we brought in with a great training background. She since has been an incredible chief learning officer at a number of enormous organizations. She's tremendous. Well, I think the training organization was terrific at Avon. I actually think that it was more about the culture and more about the if I look around at Avon, most of the people that were going into and getting promoted and getting into management areas of responsibility where they had people, it was core and central to who they are, that they were coaching. It was core and central to them that it wasn't, I'm not relying on the training group. Like the cavalry is not coming here. It's my job.
Yeah.
So what you have then is a massive training organization because every leader is really coaching as well. So that I think is an umbrella statement at a company like Avon. Now, the other part is Avon invested a huge amount of effort. I mean, for me to become a division manager, they put me in a training program for almost a year. So
Wow.
It's like, wow, that's an amazing investment that they made in me, and I'm very, very thankful for it. So to me, it's both of those. Yes, huge investment, but also every leader had that responsibility for coaching. So your training department includes your leaders in the organization, whether that was sales or marketing or finance. And I could tell you at Avon or operations, great operations group of leaders who viewed their role as a big part of it as a coach for their team.
And did Avon have like documentation or training manuals that the trainers could actually call on?
Oh yes, absolutely. Very professional. So that's I mean, it was very very professionally done. And now I know that Avon. I was just talking about a project to work on, so I was familiar with their current. You know, it's still very professionally done. Um, Avon's moved much more now towards an interactive some of the a blended learning, so you're learning on your own as well as learning in the formal classroom, as well as learning with your one-on-one with your supervisor or your level above you. Um, and that's both at the representative independent contractor level, but also at the employee group. So they've really moved to a very robust hybrid model, which they use all the modern technology of gamification within that, and how do you engage. They've done a lot of research. We did great work with other companies like Maritz back when I was there, and really great companies that are look at adult learning behavioral models. So yeah, there was a big investment in it.
Yeah, and of course, providing all of that foundation material helps the coaches to teach
Oh
the
yeah,
people
they
because
right.
it creates a single message all the way down the
Yes, it
line.
was correct. The coaches, and by the way, many of the coaches had been district managers before, so they could speak the language. Maybe it was a career move for them. As I said before, for me, I was a finance guy, and I said, kind of like to do something different. Many of the coaches and the trainers that we had were district managers, said, I'd like to try something. And if we went through a very robust selection process, but you know, we would make that happen if that person showed the capabilities to be an effective coach. It's such an important role.
Yeah, desire as well, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to incentives because that is a huge part of our industry. There's all sorts of incentives, starting from small ones right the way to big travel
Yep.
incentives and
Yep.
taking people around the world. How did Avon handle incentives? What was their policies and
Yeah.
procedures around
Yeah.
that?
So incentives are an area I personally had responsibility for incentives when I was there, and we use incentives for the main purpose of incentives was for energy. The main purpose was for short term focusing this volunteer army, on something specific, and that specific element could be a Hallmark holiday. So, for example, around Mother's Day, we wanted everybody focused on a particular product or a particular activity. So we use those incentive programs to really focus the army, which by the nature of the beast could be highly unfocused because, as I said, we're all listening to what are their dreams and goals, which is
Yeah,
critical to our core. Um, During the year, though, there are moments where we really felt at a corporate strategy level, it was important to galvanize the team for short sprints. I view incentives as short sprints. I view recognition as how do we weave it all together. So on the incentive
yeah,
side, short sprints, we used it for that. We did everything from small incentives at the district and at a very very small level, all the way to large incentives that would include trips, as you're mentioning. We would incent mostly around product or around a campaign. At Avon, we would have campaigns that we would incent against. Maybe it was a fragrance launch. Maybe it was an incentive that said, what person, what team, if you sold X amount, you get to go on this trip, or you get to get this prize, or these number of points. Or it could be at how do we, in times of down, so in other words, summertime, um, right after Christmas, how do we minimize and how do we keep people engaged with us? So there's an incentive to stay with us. And so that is, again, a short term energy play that was very tactical. And that's the way we would view it. We did full return on investment analysis on them because it's expensive. And we spent a lot of money on incentives.
And okay, can you give me an example of a small incentive? What kind of time period are you
Yeah,
looking
small
at for that
incentive could be,
incentive?
let's say, in Avon terms, 2 to 3 campaigns, which is about 4 to 6 weeks. So we'd have a short
Okay.
sprint. Avon in the U.S. and globally, the Avon campaign was more like 3 weeks, but in the U.S. it was a 2 week campaign, and we would have, let's say, maybe it was a 2 to 3 campaign incentive. So over these 3 campaigns, um, whomever, if you were active, excuse me, in every one of those campaigns, you got X. It could have been you got a free product. It could have been something bigger if the ask was greater. And we would do multiple levels of it. So we would do a level which is just if you are engaged in this, we call it you do, you get. If you're engaged in it, you get something modest, but you got something. If you excel or one of the top achievers, you got a much bigger prize. All part of the same incentive time period, but 2 to 3 campaigns was a good amount of time where you keep people's attention, but keep it short enough where we have a business outcome.
I'm with you. And then for your big sort of travel
Yeah, yeah. The travel
incentives,
ones were usually longer, and maybe that would include a full quarter, or maybe it was 2 months. So in a full quarter, you're talking about, a much longer time period. And obviously, the challenge there is keeping people focused and engaged on that during that longer period of time. Remember, a cycle is every 2 weeks, so you're talking about 6 to 7 campaigns. That's a long time, many times, to keep people focused. So it would have to be a much bigger, and that would be usually the longest length we would do for an incentive.
and then who goes on that incentive? Is it only the top 20 performers,
Oh
or
no,
how do
sometimes they're
you
far
how do you?
larger than that. Again, we would like to build multi-layered incentives, so we like to build them with the you do you get. So there is a group, and I'll give you an example. Let's say we're going on a trip. Maybe the group, everybody that would do the minimum level of requirement would get to go on the trip, but the top achievers got to bring a guest. The top achievers had an extra night. They had a VIP reception. They got a piece of jewelry to go along with this cruise, we'll call it. This travel cruise or this trip to X location. And we would try on the larger
I
ones
see.
to be more mindful that you do you gets are important. Um, and sometimes we would do the you do you get as not part of the trip. So it was a program, and if you did the minimum requirement, you got some product for it, or some um, more than a product, but let's say it was an electronics, a piece of something from an electronics type of catalog. But the top achievers got to go on a trip, and that trip was always hosted by the VIPs. So, VIPs meaning some senior man, some senior leader that was a part of their life as a leader, and so it was really exciting for them to go. The recognition was part of that, so it wasn't just the incentive; it was the recognition was very important to us. That's why we like trips, because we got to touch people, and we got it rather than just the product, or the old days, like an a phone, earphones, nice, and they get to remember that. But we like to give it to them personally on a trip if we can.
Yeah. Yeah, and getting those people in, you can get them into a room and you can hot bath them to the
Yeah,
nth degree and get them fired up so when they
that's
come
right.
back, they hit the
And we
ground
and we
running.
obviously always
Yeah.
had, after a trip, we always had a challenge for them. Here's the call to action. Thank you. You're wonderful. We love you. And here's the call to action when you come out of here. Because you're right. At that time, they are at a heightened sense of closeness to the organization. The bonds are closer, and therefore their enthusiasm and engagement quotient has gone up. So we want to take.
Yeah, and how do you feel about taking partners on these trips?
It's a great question. I've when at Avon, we did it for only certain types of trips, or you earned a partner. So at Avon, for the program recognition, you could buy in always. You could buy in, um, or you could earn at the highest level. You earn the partner. I like it very much as long as there's not a heavy business portion of the event that let's say the partner wouldn't be involved and engaged with. The reason I like it so much is because so many of our representatives, their spouses, their daughter, were a part of their business, and that's the one time they get to show some people, here are the fruits of my labor. When they all see the boxes in their living room of product, like, mom, or what are you doing? And then they get to see them recognized. It's just a tremendous experience for them.
Oh. I was chatting with a lady who's the top salesperson or the top team leader in the world
Hmm.
for Tupperware. And she was saying to me that on every single one of her trips, she wants the partners to come. And I said to her, why? And she said, very often the women are not getting recognized by their husbands because their husbands think
Yeah,
they're wasting their
yeah,
time. And when the husband gets to see what is actually going on and gets to see their wife being recognized in front of their peers and gets to see exactly the magnitude of the business, that it changes them
yeah.
as a couple. It changes his
I've
opinion of
seen
her.
it. I know many, many husbands from my Avon days of, they are totally bought in, but they would tell you, most of them, that it took them being there and seeing it to really understand the way that their wife, or whomever their partner might be, is recognized, and the impact that they have in this gigantic business. So it really makes a difference.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited about that because that's not my opinion. Was always you leave the partners out because you want to focus on your team. So that
Hmm.
changed my
Hmm.
attitude completely about that
Hmm.
particular aspect of it. So incentives are a huge thing. I find that that drives as well. It drives your competitive
Oh yeah,
people.
for sure. I mean, I'm a competitive person, so I mean, just speaking for myself, when I went from finance to sales, and I saw that there were these also short-term energy incentives for, at that time, a division manager. Oh, trust me, I could feel the competitive spirit in me welling up. So for incentives as well as recognition, I never thought of myself as needing a pat on the back. I was a stoic jock, like, that's who I am.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that, it changed my appreciation for the impact of who I am when I realized, when I got recognized. And cute story about this. We were very fortunate to be what's called a world sales leader when I was a division manager. I had a great team, all-star team. And we won. We were number one. And my wife was quite pregnant with, I think it was my second child. I'm not sure. I think it was my second child. And trip was to Argentina. The World Sales League. These are the top division managers in the world of Avon. And my wife couldn't go, so I asked my dad to come with me, because that was part of the. You were asking before about bringing spouses or guests.
Yeah.
And my dad's really modest. He's a gym teacher. Didn't travel the world except for when we lived in Hong Kong. He visited there, but he hadn't seen it, and certainly he's never seen an Avon event. Forget it, never. So I brought him there, and I think he had a better time than I did, because he was blown away with the level of recognition that I got. Blown away to meet the CEO, Andrea Jung, and these really important people in my life, and to see them recognizing me, for him, was just this great amount of pride. So I had the best time, watching him. So you're right.
Yeah.
Recognition incentives are motivating energy, for what, sales is hard, and is motivating energy to keep people going, for sure, me included.
Yeah, look, and this is the thing that so often is missed because it's not about just the money and it's not about just the product. I divide it up into five segments of 20% each. I think that 20% of your people are driven by the product, and it's the Pareto
Yep.
principle, 80-20. 20% are driven by the money, 20% by incentives, 20% by recognition, and 20% by the social or
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
connectivity,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, the human connectivity. And if you're only doing product and commissions, which many companies are doing, you've got a
Yeah.
40% business. And that's assuming you're doing product and
Yeah.
commissions perfectly,
Yeah.
which you're not. And then you wonder why your
Yeah.
business fails. But it's actually all of these soft things that come into play to make the business exceptional, to build an Avon, for example. Okay, what I want to just touch on meetings and events. You guys obviously have some
Yeah.
epic events and meetings, but they start small and they go right the way through to big
Right.
national conventions
Right.
and gala evenings. Can you give me some idea of
Yeah.
how those
Sure.
work
It's
with you
similar to
guys?
what I described earlier. Um, Avon was created on like think of it very hierarchical. Community first, so individual, then community, then a larger community, more like a regional, and then ultimately up to national. And there were meetings and trainings that took place at every level. And the reason for that was on a practical level. Pe- this is not the everything of everyone's life. So if you only have a national meeting, you're going to get a very small percentage of your people that you can touch and speak to and build those bonds. So we felt strongly that we needed to have a local presence in meetings. Now, obviously, now things have changed in terms of live versus virtual and hybrids, but still there is this, and I believe there's still a need for localized meetings and connectivity through meetings where it's not just at the national Zoom call where your VP of sales or your VP of field development or whatever you want to call them is going to go through the programs and going to go through some recognition. That's all good. But what Avon we did, I think, and I think some of the really great companies of today are doing, is they still recognize that there is a community level or maybe a team level. If you're it genealogically, right? At Avon, we did it geographically.
Yeah.
Said we have a team, we have a geographic. These three towns, we're going to have a meeting, and those built up. It's expensive. It's an investment in the connectivity, but it's all part of the investment in what we talked about earlier, which is this: how do you bring the culture together? How do you demonstrate over and over and over again that we are about dreams and goals, and over again the
Yeah.
recognition and the new product? That was our way of doing it. Those then did, to your point, ramped up, where then we would have division meetings, which is, let's say, a state, and then regional meetings, and then national meetings, both for management as well as for the representatives.
And how big were
Oh,
those
national
national
meetings,
meetings?
national meetings, believe it or not, weren't as big as some of our competitors, but national meetings, could be 10 to 15,000 people. Yeah,
That's a lot of
no,
people.
absolutely. I think that some of the other companies in the space, the larger companies, could get more because they built their structure around that is the absolute end all meeting. Our philosophy was a little bit different, and that yes, of course, we want people to come, but when I was the VP of sales at Avon, I'm measuring attendance at the local level. I want to know how we're doing at the local level because to me that was a better indicator. I could tell you who's going to come to the national meeting.
Yeah.
I could tell you. I knew who was going to come because I had enough statistics to say, here's roughly our number. And what was a better indicator for me was how many people were coming to our local meetings. That was a better engagement indicator for me to say, are our representatives engaged with us as this better, the same, or worse than they had been? Because if I saw those numbers dipping, I was like, oh, that's a early warning signal. We got a problem.
Did the guys have to
Yeah,
book for those
they have to
meetings?
report out to them. So they had to report out
And did they have to
attendance.
pay to come to
So it
them?
reported out attendance, and then we would aggregate those numbers. It was one of the statistics that we looked at. We coached to it. So if we saw a district, we talked earlier about coaching. If we saw a district that was struggling in terms of attendance, we would coach to it. Division manager would show up. Maybe we get a peer to show up, maybe a coach to show up, and to help them. What's happening? Is it is it the meeting itself? Is it the tactile invitation of the meeting? Do you not have enough people in your, we'll call them your amen corner, that are helping you drive attendance? So we would get to it by looking at the statistics.
And did the guys pay to be at those meetings? Was it free? Or?
Some of them, not all of them. The national meetings, yes. The local meetings, we did not charge for.
And the national meetings, what kind of cost was involved? What did you charge, more or less?
Boy, that's a good question. It's too dated for me, Richard. I don't even remember the numbers. It was, I don't remember, honestly, because at the time we had a lot of people that could earn it, and so to your point, we had incentives. We wanted people there, so we would create incentives that would be an earn in for the event itself. So so we didn't like the event to be costing them more than $500 to $1,000, because that would be a burden. It would really dampen. So we would have a lot of our programs that would be leading up to, how does this help you get there? Because we knew once you were there, it's going to be magical.
Yeah, and these meetings are incredible. I mean, I've been to a few of them, and it's just amazing the energy it creates, and the belief it creates as well. People don't realize that when you walk into a room with 12,000 other like-minded people, it changes you as a person. Because
yeah. I mean, think about it, Richard. Here we are, we're talking, but we're remote. Every Avon representative, every R-Barn consultant, they're on their own.
Yes.
For pretty much all day long, and this is a chance to physically get together. You really feel it, and I think of many salespeople in other industries too. When you go to a corporate convention, you feel connected to the other people that are out there and are road warriors with you. So it definitely is a way to bring it and strengthen the bonds.
And also, I mean, it's the whole point is the scale of the business. When I was a kid, I sold vacuum cleaners called Rainbows. I don't know if you know the Rainbow vacuum cleaner.
I don't.
Okay, so it's a water vacuum cleaner. It sucks the air through the water, and wet dirt doesn't fly, and that's their whole shtick.
Yep.
And we ran an incentive, and I got to go to the States, and I went to Dallas, and there were 20,000 people at the meeting.
Wow.
Yeah. And up until then, I was this lonely salesperson, youngster in Cape Town, knocking on doors, and I would go up with an extension lead and say to the person, if you plug this into the wall, I'll show you what's connected to the other side. and up until that moment, I'd been just this individual person selling vacuum cleaners door to door. And the day that I went there, I realized the global scale of this business, and it changed my mind completely. And it gave me the opportunity to just rocket through the ranks, because I realized that this was a place I could reach,
For sure. I'll go back to my Avon days. I mentioned, I went from finance to sales. And in finance, I never went to we called it conference. I never went to conference. And then I moved to sales, and I was still in training. And I went to conference, and I was like, this is the greatest thing in the world.
Isn't that right?
And I totally got it. Whereas I thought I had it beforehand. I didn't have it. I went there, and I got the emotional parts of it, the motivation, the inspiration that I could not replicate without going to convention.
It just changes you, doesn't it? Changes your whole mindset.
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think companies don't realize that. And the fact that you can charge for these events, you can incentivize them and you can charge for them, is you can make them self-funding. So if you're on a tight budget, you can actually fund them through the network.
Yeah, that's to me, again, we talked about execution earlier. I think a lot of people have great ideas in the industry. I just think that we're missing a bit of the execution of those. And I mean, many companies have the ability to earn into it. It's, putting it together with a full financial P&L. I think is people get scared, right? It's a big expense. Um, that's why I think holistically looking at it, what do you get out of it, and what does it cost you, and how can you tie your incentives and recognition with this as part of that whole cost of within your value chain?
Yeah.
How do you include this, your events? Because that's what we did. We included that in our pool of money that we had, our percentage of money we're going to spend on incentive events and recognition was a bucket, and we thought of them all connected to each other,
Yeah.
and so we would make sure that there was alignment between those three. I would call inspiration, motivational, activation elements of our selling
Yeah.
expenses.
And some of them don't actually have to cost a lot of money. Recognition doesn't have to be expensive.
No, no, it doesn't. You're absolutely right. And I again, I would say that the industry, not just Avon, the industry does it. I think many of them a great job on this, on making recognition. I don't want to call it cheap and cheerful, but meaningful and inexpensive, and that is there's great value to
Yeah.
that because it's genuine. It's
100%.
genuine, and I think that there are many great companies out there in our space that do it so much better
Yeah.
than companies that are not in the direct selling space that really struggle here.
Well, it's because
And
they
you can
don't
see their
understand
turnover rates
it
are terrible.
and they've never seen
Yeah,
it,
they don't,
you know.
right, and don't value it because it's more of a nebulous P&L
Yeah.
factor, right? So they don't value it to the same degree, and they think it's they're not correct. I don't believe.
No, of
Um,
course.
they view it as too soft and not a meaningful indicator, but it is.
I personally think it's one of the key drivers of our industry because I think that if you go into traditional business, it's sorely lacking. Recognition is sorely lacking. Generally, your boss is
Agreed.
trying to take credit for your work, not recognize you for it. And so I
It is
think,
sorely lacking. It's institutionally lacking. That's their issue, I believe.
yeah,
It's institutionally lacking and not valued. And so therefore, if it's not valued, something else will get in the way.
exactly right, 100%. You mentioned earlier on, and I've written it down here, is that you were responsible for deciding on what new regions to go into. Can you kind of just dive into that and tell me, how do you go about opening a new region? What are the key performance indicators you're looking for? What are the issues that sort of open that country up for you?
Yeah, and I would say that I was part of the team that would make, particularly when I was in Asia, when we were in Asia and looking at in those years, really looking at how do you expand, how do you geographically expand. Avon had already had a great footprint around the world, um, and so it was really now, well, open space. So those years it was, do we want to go to India? Do we want to go to Indonesia? Do we want to go to China? Do we want to go to Vietnam? So there were all these questions, and each of them, for me, I was the finance support for that. So, uh, we were really running through modeling, you know, and a lot of it was demographic modeling and applying those demographics to what we finding like kind models in our Avon world, and how do we apply that? Building in certain assumptions in terms of how long does it take, what are the requirements, etc. The other part, though, very important, would be, we always had a legal team. So there's, it's different countries, different laws, different rules.
Yeah.
So how do you have a legal team that's part of that? So I'd recommend any company is definitely including that in their consideration, because there were even there are ownership requirements in different countries that you don't think about. There are tax implications. There's repatriation of currency. All of those. There's how does your compensation plan map over to another country from even an earnings point of view. So these are legal and economics. And then the other part that we always looked at was what was the competitive landscape, and a little bit less so on the direct selling side, but on the product side. So will our products have stiff local competition or global competition? What's the price point that we need to sell our product at in order to make a margin that we can support a business? And how does that compare at the consumer level, not the distributor level, at the consumer level? How does that compare to the competitor? Because we don't want to go spend all the money, effort, and energy to go to a country and sell our lipstick, and it's 2 times more expensive than L'Oreal has decided to sell. Now L'Oreal is not a direct seller, but that's what the consumer is going to say.
Yeah.
Why would I buy your Avon lipstick when I could buy a L'Oreal lipstick for the same price or less? And I've heard of L'Oreal more than I've heard of Avon.
Mm.
So those are the kind of the components, and we have full checklists. Nowadays it's like you got a game. Here's a game plan, and for me, I usually work actually with uh, um, other consultants that are in Europe, for example, or in Asia or in Latin America to help me navigate, because frankly, it's very difficult for one person in the US to know all the rules
Yeah.
about every part of the world. So I really rely on my colleagues, my network in that region to say, because I have clients that want to, let's say, move to, they may be English speaking. So what do they normally want to do? They want to go to Canada, the UK, Australia. And, you know, that's what they want to do because they don't want to change language. But I'll always go to my contacts and colleagues in those regions to talk about what are the requirements for consideration.
And also, there's the whole story of compliance, because
Absolutely, yeah. When
in
I
the
say
MLM
legal, you're
space,
absolutely right.
yeah, in the MLM
Absolutely, no.
space,
It's a big piece. It's not it's not something that just just because the world has gotten smaller, it doesn't mean that there aren't high levels of complexity going to a different country.
and how important is compliance?
Oh, I think it's hugely important. I mean, without considering compliance, you can be shut down. You can be shut down for a number of reasons, and it's very difficult, as I'm sure you know, um, to. I think of it as inertia. When you stop and get shut down or pause, your whole organization goes into a state of inertia. Very hard to move something out of inertia. A
Yeah,
lot of energy. So the
impossible.
whole idea is that you can't afford to get shut down because that slows even modest momentum. It slows it down to a stopping point. Stopping point is the killer in many industries, but certainly our industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's just devastating, and it's there's people in our space who get involved who are ignorant of the laws and are ignorant of the compliance requirements, and then land up in jail. I mean, this is
Yeah,
not something that you can actually take lightly, because it's incredibly serious. And if you get it
yeah,
wrong, you know, there are,
yeah.
there are dire consequences.
The good news is, yeah, for sure. The good news is there are a lot of people out there to help in the industry, and I know I send people to my core group of trusted advisors, and I'm sure you do the same. And I think that anybody who is on the other end listening to this, I would hope would know enough to contact somebody either in their direct selling association in Europe or Asia or US or Latin America to help me navigate to someone who can help me with this decision, because it is not something to wing it. There's not a cowboy moment, because there's too much downside to it.
Yeah, and you, as I said earlier on, you're starting this multi-billion-dollar business. You can't afford to screw up on this end.
Right.
You know,
That's right.
you got to
That's
get
right.
it right. And you
That's
and
right.
the other thing is, you can't change once you're going to change course is very difficult. Like, for example, if your compensation plan isn't compliant, and now you've got to change tack, you upset your entire network.
That's right.
You can crush them.
That's right. That was my point. Yeah, earlier that I would agree. It's so difficult to restart after stopping. Once you get a little momentum or a little motion, even not momentum, motion. Think of it like a boulder. If that boulder sits for too long, it's very hard to get it moving again. You got you got to keep the boulder, even if it's going slowly. You got to keep it in motion. Um, it's physics, right? This is
Yeah.
just human physics, and I think it's very difficult to restart.
And in our business, it's actually not a boulder, it's a million little stones.
That's
And the
right. That's
problem
right.
is all of those stones migrate to Amway and you lose them. So
That's
it's
right.
not even like they're there to get in motion again. They're just gone.
That's
They
right. They're gone.
evaporate and
That's a
that's it.
very good analogy. Better analogy. I'm gonna take that from you if you don't mind. I
No,
like
you
that.
can have it. It's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I've been saying to our clients is, look, and it's the big reason why I'm interviewing people like you, Rich, is that there's a real need for people who are coming into this industry, first of all, to understand the scale of it, and second of all, to understand how desperately they need help to do this right. You know, that you can get it wrong very quickly and you can get yourself into a lot of trouble very quickly in this industry. And you really do need professional help. And as you know, I've interviewed guys like Mark and people like that who are in
Yep.
this space. And I'm going to continue to do that. And I'm going to continue to refer people like you to our network of CEOs who listen to this particular channel.
And as you know, Mark is who I go to for Europe. So this is the community of trusted advisors, with
Yeah,
people with a lot of experience that can really help through, what are those pitfalls that can be avoided. They can be avoided.
yeah, 100%. And the the savings in doing it right first time cannot be quantified.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
know, it just makes all of the difference in the world. Okay, well, I think I had one more thing that I had. Let me have a look. Um, oh yes, right. Getting into land here. There's two things I want to talk about. The first of all is, when it comes to consulting, what do you have? What is on your sort of menu that people can select from if they're wanting to get? Do you do compensation planning? Do you
Yeah,
all of that kind of
yeah.
stuff?
So for me, what I really break my practice into a couple different buckets. Uh, First bucket is I do quite a bit of fractional leadership. So I do come in as an interim leader. Um, that's a very common way for me to help a company. So I'll go in there and help actually take over the sales function for either a period of time or a part-time basis, and that's quite effective and cost effective for companies as they're going through their growing pains, frankly, or in their moments when they want to pivot. So I've kind of stepped in all the bad holes you want to avoid. So I like to think that I can help my clients avoid those pitfalls, and help them scale and grow. That's one area. Second area is more what you're talking about, which is how do I get involved in specific projects and advisory work? So in that case, yes, certainly compensation. I've got a group that works with me on compensation. I do a lot of work on affiliate marketing, platform work. So adoption, how do you get field adoption? Many of us put program platforms out there, and then you know we have a little problem with the field using the tool. So I do a lot of work with companies in terms of adoption of tools, whether or not that is a selling tool, a training tool, a CRM tool in other parts of my practice. So a lot of work in those kind of project areas for that. And then the last piece that I do, um, about 20% of my time is on executive coaching, and that fits our industry really well. Very different than advisory. Like in executive coaching, I'm not telling people what to do, but there are a lot of founders who and incredible people, but really are lonely in that who's there, who can they talk to? And
Yeah,
I don't mean I'm a therapist. That's not it at all. But I am a certified executive coach, so I help them through how to unlock their potential and how to unlock their leadership, um, to really broaden their influence over their teams. Those are the three areas that I do personally. And then I've got, I'm part of a fairly large firm where I bring in fractional uh, CFO. So again, particularly founder-based business they don't have their finance in order. I have a CFO practice, of a chief marketing office practice that I bring in as well chief technology office that I bring, and a chief HR office. So those are kind of the main areas that I bring my firm in to support. And that's why I joined them, frankly, was to broaden my capabilities to support the industry.
Yeah, to provide all of the different areas which a small company who's starting out might not have a
Right.
CFO or a marketing officer, whatever. They might not have any of those key C-suite positions filled.
Yeah,
And so that's what you,
and frankly, it's expensive, to hire a full time CFO when you're a $30 million company. It's expensive, um, but the fractional CFO, isn't that much money because they're very experienced people, and they do it at a fraction of the cost, for
yeah,
a fraction of the time. So it's quite effective actually.
yeah, it's nice. Okay, how do people get hold of you?
They can reach me at my website, which is my email, rich.makover@techcxo.com. That's techcom.com. They can go to our website, www.techcxo.com, and they can see my bio. They can make contact with me directly there. So those are the best two ways to reach me. I am, looking forward. I do go to many of the direct selling events. So in the US, I'll be heading out to DSU and next week, the DSA event in June, as well as a number of more regional events. So I try to get out and about physically. Haven't hopped across the either big lakes called the Atlantic or the Pacific in a long time, but I'd love to. So, but best way to reach me is through through our website, or through my email.
And obviously, I'll put links to all of this
Great.
in the base of this YouTube presentation, and this will be going out on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook. It's also going to be a podcast, which will be on all the major podcasting platforms. So this will be all over the place.
Oh, great.
And yeah, and I think this has been a wonderful, wonderful interview. It's been fantastic chatting with you, Rich. I really have enjoyed it.
Well, I have too. And
Um,
Richard, I want to thank you for not only inviting me, but also I think it's a great service that you're providing. Your heart is so clearly in the right place for the industry. And I want to thank you for doing that. I hope a lot of people take advantage of this kind of these moments of information and inspiration, and really helps the entire industry through what is a tough time right now, not only for the industry, but also for a lot of the folks that have been doing it for a long time and are wondering, how do I get out of this mess? How do I move forward in a
yeah.
thoughtful manner? So I appreciate you including me in that, and I hope I was able to add a little bit of inspiration and idea, to many of your guests that'll be listening in.
No, I'm 100% sure that you have. There's been some real nuggets and some gems that have come out today that I've really enjoyed. So I'm sure it's going to be very, very valuable to those people who listen. I'll send you a link and I'm going to ask you to get that out to everybody that you know as well. So
Will do.
let's get as many people taking a listen as possible.
I will do for sure.
Well, Richard, thank you very much. And it was really appreciated.
Thank you.